It's Tuesday, the 21st of December, and you're watching Euronews now. Let's take a look at the latest headlines. Omicron fears spread. The World Health Organization urges people to cancel Christmas events and celebrate later. Prisons for rent. After struggling with overcrowding in its cells, Denmark pays Albania 20 million euros to relocate its inmates. And as Turkey, Iran and Russia begin another effort for peace in Syria, we'll talk to an expert about Europe's role in finding a solution.
Millions across Europe are hoping for a festive time this weekend with family and friends, but for the second year running, this could be in doubt. The World Health Organization is recommending cancelling events over the holiday period in the light of growing cases of the Omicron variant of coronavirus worldwide. It's a message few want to hear.
All of us are sick of this pandemic. All of us want to spend time with friends and family. But an event cancelled is better than a life cancelled. It's better to cancel now and celebrate later than to celebrate now and grieve later. None of us want to be here again in 12 months' time.
But for most governments, the focus is on booster campaigns or considering possible lockdowns. The Netherlands is already in one of those. Switzerland has announced tight new COVID measures from December the 20th, including making working from home mandatory for all those who can.
To be honest, I find it a bit difficult with the topic of vaccination. Now you're vaccinated and have the feeling that it's good, but somehow you notice that it still doesn't help that much.
In Germany, federal and state governments are considering contact restrictions after Christmas, even for the vaccinated and recovering individuals.
For example, you can reduce the size of groups. In Bavaria, they have already closed bars and clubs for the upcoming days and weeks to avoid hotspots and super spreading events.
Meanwhile, Germany's new Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, says the country will reach its target of offering booster shots to at least 30 million citizens by the end of the year.
Kosovo has reached a deal to rent 300 of its jail cells to Denmark, in an unusual move that will cost Copenhagen an annual fee of 20 million euros. Authorities say this is to ease overcrowding in the Scandinavian country's prison system, as jail population has had a 20% jump. Inmates sent to Kosovo will be foreigners, subject to deportation after serving their sentences.
The intention is that the prisoners that will serve their sentence here in Kosovo will be prisoners that are expelled from Denmark by the court of law, and there will be, of course, a talk about which prisoners this will entail, but we have already talked about that there will be transfers, no that are convicted to terror, no that are convicted to war crimes.
Non-profit organizations monitoring the correctional system in Kosovo have said other prisons will naturally be overpopulated in order to make way for the incoming prisoners.
In Raqqa, Syria, the former de facto capital of ISIS, the scars of the fighting are easy to see. It's been 10 years since the war in Syria began. The 17th round of the Astana peace process is underway. Russia, Turkey, Iran, the Syrian government and opposition all sent delegations. However, the West is absent.
No outside powers of the major donor countries like the United States or the European Union wishes to engage in the reconstruction process, to fund that, because they do not wish to give the regime any means of support. So in many ways, the situation is stuck.
The UN estimates at least 350,000 people have been killed overall. With issues such as refugees, the release of detainees, a humanitarian crisis, and the possible regrouping of ISIS cells, the delegates will have much to consider at these talks.
Slovenia is struggling with crime in its partially neglected Roma villages. Due to an increased number of thefts and vandalism, the police are implementing intensive controls with the help of horseback units and Roma police officers.
I don't know. Our family doesn't steal, but I'm not responsible for the others.
Residents and businessmen from the industrial area Dobruška Vas of Škocjan have urged the authorities to restore order because of, they say, unbearable conditions.
The Roma are damaging other people's property, slashing tyres, stealing from the crop fields, making open fires, and there's a lot of noise disturbance in the Roma settlements.
Mayor Jože Kapler has repeatedly urged the government to take action.
In fact, it's difficult for Roma to get jobs, but if the state would create some social enterprise for them to join, there would be visible progress.
The NGO Amnesty International estimates that 11,000 Roma people live in Slovenia, most of them in isolated settlements or slums. 7 years ago, a Roma family from the Dobruška Vas settlement complained to the European Court of Human Rights about the lack of access to water.
The mayor of the municipality has provided us with water, but we also need electricity.
In Europe, half of Roma children and youth are not in education. According to the Dobruška Vas authorities, few Roma girls attend high school and teenage pregnancy levels are high. To convince Roma parents of the value of education, the Slovenian Ministry of the Interior plans to cut social benefits for those who do not comply with mandatory schooling.
We want to change the law to ensure that parents lose this money if their children do not go to school.
According to an EU report, Roma adolescents can become easy targets for those who induce them to commit crimes. Although in this municipality there are still tensions as well as criminal acts, hopes remain that one day these two ethnic groups will finally get along. Johannes Plešberger, Euronews, Dobruška Vas, Slovenia.
Thousands of people filled the center of Buenos Aires on day 2 of rallies, marking the 20th anniversary of Argentina's so-called Great Crisis. 39 people were killed in a government crackdown during protests over economic meltdown. It led to the resignation of the then president Fernando de la Rúa, who fled the country.
The jury has begun its deliberations in Ghislaine Maxwell's sex trafficking trial in New York. The prosecution earlier closed its arguments calling the girlfriend of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein a sophisticated predator. The defense insists Maxwell is being made a scapegoat for the crimes of the late Epstein, who killed himself in prison. A verdict is expected before Christmas.
In a neighbourhood of Barcelona, parents have created an initiative to reclaim the city's busy roads and promote green and safe travel for children.
We need more bike lanes and they need to be safer. There are bike lanes, but they are not so safe because there are some that go in the middle of the road or on the side. We need fewer cars and more bikes.
Launched in September, the roads in the area are now closed every Friday to cars, allowing children to bike to school with accompanying adults. And just like a bus, they pick up schoolmates along the way. As well as teaching children about the importance of sport and low-impact transport, the initiative has also highlighted the importance of improving how the city works for children.
The cycling infrastructure is designed for people who are alone and who have a certain ability on a bike, not for boys and girls who have just started. The bike lanes are all on the road. They're very close to the streets, where cars travel very fast and where motorcycles also get too close. The infrastructure isn't suitable for children who have just learned to cycle.
The cycling scheme has been a huge success, so much so that it has generated international interest. And other neighbourhoods in the Catalan capital are also looking to replicate it.
Omicron is now the dominant COVID-19 variant in the US, and it has people concerned ahead of the holidays. Most states have cases confirmed, with Florida and Washington the current hotspots.
I think I'm glad to see that people are getting tests if they're going to travel. I assume that's part of the reason why they're doing it with the upcoming holidays, but it's also probably because a lot of people are starting to not feel very well with the new Omicron variant. So it's disappointing and it's mixed emotions.
There is a speculation the US is headed for lockdown, with President Joe Biden due to make a speech on Omicron later on Tuesday.
This is not a speech about locking the country down. This is a speech outlining and being direct and clear with the American people about the benefits of being vaccinated, the steps we're going to take to increase access and to increase testing, and the risks posed to unvaccinated individuals.
The top pandemic advisor Anthony Fauci is certainly on message.
Is if we do what we have been recommending very repetitively and intensively, vaccination, booster, mitigation with masks in congregate settings, and over time we feel confident that we will get this under control.
US experts say vaccinations cannot protect completely against infection, but can reduce hospitalizations and deaths.
Poland and Lithuania has joined Ukraine in a call for stronger Western sanctions against Moscow. This comes amid a Russian troop build-up near the Ukrainian border, fueling fears of an invasion possibly as early as next year. The leaders met with President Volodymyr Zelensky in a show of support in the face of what they describe as ongoing aggression against Ukraine. Together, the premiers signed a joint treaty aimed at prioritising their common security and economic interests. Zelensky said, "Our shared task is to contain the threat, to protect Europe from aggressive Russian policy." Today, Ukraine, Poland and Lithuania are at the forefront of this containment. US intelligence officials say Russia has amassed 70,000 troops near its border with Ukraine, while US President Joe Biden has already warned that Russia would face severe consequences if Moscow attacked its neighbour. The Kremlin continues to deny any plan of attack, but says it will respond in kind if NATO deploys missiles capable of reaching Russia in a few minutes.
Let's talk a bit now more about that Lublin Triangle Summit. Joining me now is Peter Dickinson. He is the Ukraine editor at the Atlantic Council. Peter, thank you for joining us here at Euronews. The Lublin Triangle draws on its historic ties, but what can Poland and Lithuania realistically do for Ukraine?
It's limited what Poland and Lithuania can bring to the table. Obviously, neither are major, either military or economic powers, but they were able yesterday and have been able consistently in recent times to show solidarity with Ukraine, which is very welcome here in Kiev at the moment with the large Russian military buildup on the border, and also in light of the hesitant approach that we're seeing from some other European countries, notably West European countries, where there is a resistance to moving forward with sanctions threats against Russia, where there is still there are still a lot of people who are saying we need to look to dialogue rather than to entering into confrontation with the Kremlin. So the position that was expressed yesterday by the leaders of Lithuania and Poland was very welcome from a Ukrainian point of view, in that they said unambiguously that they oppose any compromises with the Kremlin. They are against policies of so-called appeasement, and they want to see a much tougher stance, including perhaps even preemptive sanctions against Russia as this build-up continues and as the threat of a major escalation in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine continues to grow. And we're entering what is considered to be a danger period now. So with the winter freeze of the ground, obviously making it potentially ideal for offensive operations. So this was a very welcome message and very welcome symbol of a show of solidarity.
Global shares have bounced back after a sell-off on Monday amid fears of the Omicron variant, inflation and various other factors hitting the world economy. Markets in Europe also saw an increase and US futures were up. Global leaders are grappling, though, with the needs of the economy versus health concerns. Many countries have seen cases snowballing just this week. Now, to get more on the economic picture in Europe, I'm joined by our business editor, Sasha Vakulina. Sasha, we've seen a slight upturn today, but we're in a very unpredictable scenario. What is the picture like as the pandemic shows no signs of slowing down?
It is truly unpredictable what we've seen over the past few days when it comes to the global stock markets. That's, of course, lots and lots of panic. Now, as all of us, we somehow thought and hoped that by the end of the year we're going to be out of this pandemic stage, but we're not, with Omicron, of course, spreading so fast everywhere. So this is exactly those concerns that they're translated there in the stock market. When it comes to the economy, when it comes to the European economy of the euro area, now, I truly think that 2021 was not actually such a bad year. It was definitely better than 2020. What happened and what we saw was somehow a surprising resilience of the European economy and how it bounced back, and it did bounce back after all the losses of 2020. That was something that not even politicians or European Central Bank actually expected to be happening, to be seeing there. We saw the economies reopening, we saw the businesses restarting, we saw people going back to work, people going back to travel, and that happened really, really quickly. That's really good news. The other thing, of course, is also because that rebound happened that significantly, we also saw this being translated, not in the best way, to the inflation in the euro area.
So many leaders are challenged with the conundrum of inflation in this, as we said, it's an unpredictable scenario. So what sort of contingencies do the ECB have in place?
Now, that's interesting because, of course, the European Central Bank, as other central banks and regulators, they stepped in at very, very early stages of the pandemic and of the COVID-19 economic crisis, trying to do their best to support the economies. But when it comes to the European Central Bank, its only mandate is actually price stability, and that's inflation. The ECB wants to see the inflation at 2%. The latest one is 4.9 in November. That's, of course, more than a double. We're not really seeing that coming down soon. We do expect to have better inflation towards the end, better in terms of the ECB and going down, towards the end of next year. So, which means, of course, with the supply and demand situation and the rebound and the continuing economic crisis and the health crisis, we are in the high inflation territory for at least half a year. Now, the ECB will have to do something, but they will have to do it very, very carefully, because what they don't want to do, they do not want to start raising the rates in order to achieve that price stability and calm down the inflation, if that would hurt the economic growth.
For the first time ever in the history of Dakar, an entirely female team will compete in January's racing event. With Mercé Martí and Margot Llobera behind the wheel and only female mechanics behind the scenes, the FN Speed team are ready to take on one of the world's toughest rallies. For everyone involved, it's an opportunity for women to be at the forefront of the sport.
The main project is to have visibility, a project made and led by women. We know that there are being drivers, co-drivers, but never a whole team. And I think this is a good opportunity to give visibility in one of the biggest platforms of motorsport. And they encourage to other girls to be mechanics and to be part of this adventure.
The 44th edition of the Endurance Rally will take place in Saudi Arabia. The grueling course over deserts and mountains is more than 8,000 kilometres long. The pair will head out at the end of December, and the race is expected to take place from the 1st to the 14th of January.
That's all for now, but do stay with us as we bring you all the latest from across Europe and beyond. You can also find more on our website, euronews.com.